When Rachel Reeves moved into number 11, the economy had already taken a battering. There were big debts and big problems, but nearly 9 months on, there are still big debts and some new big problems. A White House that might, well, who knows, bleak economic predictions in much of the world, and a squeeze on welfare that's been alarming parts of the Labour Party.
There is nothing moral about cutting benefits for what may be up to 1 million people.
I'm always conscious that with central banks, we're always accused of saying the world's uncertain, but it really is uncertain.
I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary.
Rachel Reeves, you are cutting welfare, you're cutting spending, you're cutting regulation. Are you really a Labour Chancellor?
Well, first of all, let me just take this head on. In the last Parliament, it was the worst Parliament ever for living standards. And although the previous government taxed more, people were paying more and getting less in return. Since I became Chancellor almost 9 months ago, we've been able to increase the national living wage. And so people on the national living wage will be getting a pay rise of £1,400 a year from next month. We've reduced NHS waiting lists for 5 months in a row because when we increased taxes in the budget on the wealthiest and on businesses, we put that money into our NHS to get those waiting lists down. And from April, we'll be rolling out free breakfast clubs at primary schools to help working parents and also to make sure that children get a good start in life. So I reject that characterisation of what we're doing. Well, on welfare, let me just say this. The system is in bad need of reform. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. We've got 1 in 8 young people who are not in education, employment or training. I am not willing to write off a generation of young people. And that's why we're putting in £1 billion worth of targeted, personalised support to get people back into work, contributing to their family finances and contributing to the economy.
The problem is when our viewers, some of them, look at what you've done, they don't think that you are sticking to the promises you made. David got in touch to say when people voted Labour to remove the Tories, they did not expect a continuation of Tory policies. Again, you're choosing to cut welfare. You've already taken winter fuel payments from most pensioners. What do you say to David? He's looked at what you're doing and is saying, that's not a Labour government I voted for.
At the moment, we've got 1,000 people a day going on to personal independence payments. For the people who need support, we will continue to protect them, and that's the guarantee that I will make. This is about some of things
that you are doing, and we've got viewers who've been getting in touch with us this week. Another one, Janice. She's quoted what the Prime Minister said to us, saying, as he said, the broadest shoulders should bear the heaviest burden. Is this really pensioners, the sick and the disabled? What do you say to her?
Well, at the budget last year, we froze fuel duty and we didn't increase the taxes that working people pay, their national insurance, income tax or VAT. But we did increase taxes on the wealthiest. We've got rid of the non-dom tax status, VAT on private schools. We increased capital gains tax and we tightened up the rules around inheritance tax. At the same time, we increased taxes on business.
But why
what did we use that money for?
The impression, because politics is about often what people feel the government's doing in their name. And for these people who've been getting in touch with us this week, and perhaps many people watching at home, you've given them the sense that you're not the Labour Party who made promises to them in the election. You've been doing things like cutting the winter fuel payment, cutting welfare. This week we expect you to cut the budgets of some government departments. Have you not got the story right? Or are they right to think that actually you've changed your mind on lots of things?
Well, we inherited a huge black hole, £22 billion black hole in the public finances when I became Chancellor. That required a number of difficult decisions on tax, on welfare and on spending, because I promised to bring stability back to the economy, because it wasn't the wealthiest who lost out when Liz Truss lost control of the economy. It was ordinary working people. And I said never again will we have a government that plays fast and loose with the public finances. And because of the stability that I have have been able to bring back to the economy. Andrew Bailey and the Bank of England have cut interest rates by 3 times since the general election. That means lower mortgage rates than people otherwise would have been paying, lower costs for businesses. And that volatility that we had in the economy previously that was so damaging to business confidence and investment has been, we've drawn a line under that. Yes, we've had to make difficult decisions, but on welfare, the 2 principles are these. First of all, we must protect those who need our support, and we must give all the support possible to help people back to work. I was at the job centre in my constituency in Pudsey on Friday, and I met with the work coaches there, who told me wonderful and remarkable stories about how they've helped people back into work and the transformative effect that has had on them and their families. And I want more people to have the support to get back into work.
But
we've got a benefits bill that is going through the roof where people are locked out of work. I want to change that and give more people the dignity and pride that comes from work through proper support to get there.
But we've just heard from Anila, and we've heard also from lots of viewers as well. One of them, Philip, who gets PIP at the moment, a disability payment, who feels he's been abandoned by the government. And is it worth the pain and the anxiety for some people to save £5 or £6 billion out of a government that's got a budget of more than £1 trillion? Because there's people on the other side who say, you're not really being radical at all. You're fiddling around with some of the terms and conditions, causing huge anxiety for people like Philip. Look, there he's saying, what happened to Labour? Where's your compassion? Is it worth the pain and anxiety for people like Philip and the political pain for you to save perhaps £5 or £6 billion?
Well, what I would say to Philip is that there will be no change in his personal independence payment until he comes up to his next assessment. And when Philip was last assessed, I expect he didn't see an assessor face-to-face, and he probably didn't see somebody who was trained adequately. We want to have more face-to-face assessments with people that are trained to give people like Philip the support that they need. And if Philip cannot work, he will continue to get personal independence payments. In fact, we've said there should be enhanced support for the most disabled. But at the same time, we want to help those people who can work through personalised and targeted support get back into work, whether they have mental health problems. And the big increase in the benefits bill is from more and more young people claiming sickness and disability benefits. I don't believe that there are 1 in 8 young people in Britain today who actually can't work. We've got to help them get the training and the support to get back into work, not writing them off for a lifetime of eking out an existence. We want those people to have fulfilling careers, and we're going to give them the support to get there.
The big picture, though, here, Rachel Reeves, when you look across everything that's happened, is before the election, you said you wouldn't have to make cuts and you wouldn't really have to raise taxes because you were going to get the economy to grow. What was visible from space, which almost every economic expert said, was that actually whoever won the election was going to have to put up taxes and they were going to have to make cuts. And here we are. You've already put up taxes and you are going to have to make cuts. So why weren't you straight with people in the election in July? Because it was obvious this was going to happen. And some people are quite hacked off that you weren't straight about it then.
I made a commitment during the election, Keir Starmer made a commitment, that we wouldn't increase the key taxes that working people pay. Their income tax, their national insurance and their VAT. And those are promises that I stuck with in the budget last year. It meant I had to make other difficult decisions, but that money we raised through increasing taxes on the wealthy and on business have meant that for 5 months in a row, we've been able to reduce NHS waiting lists, delivering on that promise of change to ensure that people can see a doctor and get the support that they need when they are sick and ill.
You wouldn't have to make cuts because the economy was going to grow. The economy is stubbornly refusing to do what you're trying to get it to do. And some of the decisions you've made, like we've heard from Sasha, whacking up NI, national insurance payments for employers, are costing business. They're making it harder for them to prosper. And you are you not, going to have to announce cuts this week to government, some government departments?
There will be real terms increases in government spending in every year of this Parliament.
That's the overall. Can you confirm you're going to have to make cuts to some government departments?
We'll set out the spending settlements in June for every department. That's the spending review.
That's not my question. This is what your deputy said earlier this week. We won't be blindly cutting. So can you just be straight with our viewers now? You are going to have to make cuts to some government departments, aren't you?
we're going to invest in the areas that are our priorities. So, for example, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has announced the abolition of NHS England, and we will reinvest that money in frontline public services. So we're going to do things differently. We're going to cut the back office functions, the administrative and bureaucracy functions. The size of government increased massively during the COVID pandemic. That was 5 years ago, as you've just reported, but the size of the civil service hasn't come back during that period.
So
and we now need to make sure that we do realise those efficiency savings so we can invest in the priorities.
Can you confirm today then that government departments are being told to cut their budgets,
well, what we've asked every
running
government
costs by 15%? Can you confirm that?
We are, by the end of this Parliament, making a commitment that we will cut the costs of running government by 15%. And I think anyone running a business will think that that is more than possible. Because if you look at the advances in technology and AI, we're already using it at His Majesty's Revenue and Customs and the Department for Work and Pensions to tackle fraud and error in the system, using technology alongside people, but using more technology to do some of those jobs. And if we can realise those benefits, it means that we can invest more in people working in the front line, whether it's teachers in our schools, police on our streets, or doctors and nurses in our hospitals. And that's the right thing to do. There hasn't been a zero-based review of what government spends money on since 2007. That's 18 years ago. No business would run like that. So we've asked every department to rank all of their spending from the most important to the least. And we want to put more money into the things that are the most important things for voters, for citizens, and less money on the things that are just not necessary or we should be doing in a different way.
As we discovered last week when we were talking to one of your colleagues, for many civil servants, it's also a worrying time because they listen to you and they think that means my job. And for many other people watching, they hear, well, there's cuts to welfare, cuts to some government spending. And for years, you promised an end to austerity. There's some people on the left of your party who believe you are now wielding the axe and there's going to be a sort of Labour austerity on the table.
In the budget last year, I put £100 billion more into capital spending than the previous government had committed to. We put more than £20 billion into the National Health Service. That is a far cry from what we've seen under Conservative governments in the last 14 years. And as a result, we are delivering more appointments, already 2 million additional appointments in the NHS
but it might feel like austerity
year.
to government departments that aren't lucky enough to be protected. We know the NHS budget is protected. Some bits of the school budget is. Defence is now being... If you are in another department, if you are in the Ministry of Justice or if you're perhaps in the Home Office, if you don't have that protection, it might feel like austerity.
Well, in the Ministry of Justice, for example, we're going to be building the prison places that we need. So we are making those investments. Well, we'll set all that out when we do the spending review. But we can't just carry on like we have been, spending on the same things that the previous government spent on. People want to know we're getting value for money when people are paying more in tax, that they're getting more in return. And that's why in the budget last year, we put that additional money into those free breakfast clubs, into reducing NHS waiting lists, and indeed increasing the pay of our armed forces, our police, our nurses and our teachers. The first sustained pay rise for more than a decade. Those were the right things to do, and that's what we used those higher taxes on the wealthy and on business to pay for.
But the sum total of the effect on the economy of those decisions you've just talked about has been a stuttering, stagnant economy. It even shrank by some of the latest measures. Everybody watching knows that you have a very tough job, even though I know you say it's your dream job. It looks like a bit of a nightmare, I think, to most people. But borrowing is up, growth is down, unemployment has been ticking up since you've been in charge. Your promise was to get the economy to grow. Do you really think you've got everything right?
Well, the world has changed, and we can see that all around us, and that is having impacts on growth. You can see that in every country. The OECD forecasts for advanced economies this week showed reductions in their growth forecasts for this year right across the board. Although next year they forecast that the UK will be the second strongest economy in the G7. But do I need to go further and faster on delivering growth? Absolutely. That's why we are reducing the regulatory burden. It's why we've just introduced the planning and infrastructure bill to get Britain building again, the 1.5 million homes, the digital, the transport, the energy infrastructure. It's why today we've announced investment in construction skills so we can actually get those homes built with 60,000 training places to get people with the skills they need to contribute to our economy.
And you've been talking about shifting planning and getting houses built for nearly 9 months now, and actually planning approvals for housing projects have got to a record low.
You ask any house builder what do they think about the year ahead, and they're feeling more optimistic.
But the question
you can't
is,
turn everything around overnight, and we do need to do more, and you'll see more of that this week. It's also why, as we increase defence spending, which is absolutely the right thing to do in the changing world that we face, that we are using that additional investment to drive innovation and to bring good jobs in a really successful defence industry in Britain.
But it's an interesting question. After nearly 9 months in charge, and I know you planned for this job for a long time, do you think you got everything right?
There are always going to be costs for every choice that you make, but there are also costs for irresponsibility. I did the responsible thing in the budget. It required difficult choices, but now, in the changing and uncertain world we're in, we have economic stability. Markets can be confident that the fiscal rules are non-negotiable. We will bring debt down as a share of GDP from the record debt levels that we inherited from the previous government. And the Bank of England have had the confidence to cut interest rates, which has an impact on the day-to-day costs of people. And wages for the last few months have risen by almost twice the rate of inflation. Of course, we've got more to do. We've only been in government for a few months. I'm determined to bring back the growth. That is the prize that is on offer. Great public services, world-class public services, without asking working people to pay more. That's what I'm going to deliver through the stability and through the reform that I'm introducing.
Well, it is nearly 9 months, I think, that you've had in office now, and our viewers often actually get in touch with us to say they don't want to hear Labour politicians talk about what they inherited and blame the last lot. However, one of the things that is making your job more unpredictable and more difficult, perhaps, is the prospect of Donald Trump introducing tariffs around the world. It's World Tariff Day next week. It's a new one for the calendar, when we expect Donald Trump to put his new taxes on imports in place. How will the UK respond if, as he's threatened, taxes on imports do apply to the UK?
I believe in free and open trade. Last time that Donald Trump was President of the United States, trade and investment flows between our countries grew. President Trump is rightly concerned about countries that run large and persistent trade surpluses with the US. The UK is not one of those countries. We have balanced trade between our countries.
So do you think he's going to leave the UK out of it?
Well, look, let's see. Our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, had a really good meeting in the White House with President Trump a couple of weeks ago. The President and our Prime Minister agreed to enter into to talks about the future trade relationship between our countries. Let's see how that progresses over the next few days. But I want to see barriers to trade come down, not just with the US, but also, for example, with our nearest neighbours and trading partners in the European Union. And we have a summit in May between the UK and the EU as we look to improve those trade flows to help small businesses particularly trade right across the European continent.
One of the things that we understand is being discussed with the US is the tax on tech companies. It's called the Digital Services Tax. Now, that raises about £800 million. Will you consider changing or even ditching that tax if that's what the US wants?
Well, it's the right thing that companies who operate in the UK pay their taxes in the UK. And the United States government and tech companies understand that as well. But as I say, we are having discussions with the US at the moment.
So
I want to preserve free and open trade. But I think as a basic principle, you should pay tax in the countries in which you operate. And the US recognise that as well.
But I'm trying to understand, might you consider changing that tax at Trump's behest?
But we're in
or is
discussions at the moment around a whole range of things around tariffs with the United States. But we will continue to operate on that principle that you should pay taxes in the country in which you operate. And that's really important for UK-based businesses as well, that they don't face an unfair disadvantage from companies that aren't paying their taxes in Britain.
I'm trying to sort of decode, though, that answer there. You're answering, I think, very carefully, saying that, yes, you want to work with the US, but yes, it's important to pay tax. So I'm trying to decode that for our viewers. Might you tweak the digital services tax in order to save the UK economy from tariffs put in place by Donald Trump?
We've got to get the balance right, and those discussions at the moment are ongoing. We want to make progress. We do not want to see British exporters subject to higher tariffs, and we want to see trade barriers fall right across the world. It's why, for example, my colleague Johnny Reynolds, as well as having those conversations with Europe and the US, is also negotiating trade deals with India and the Gulf countries as well, because we believe in free and open trade. We want to help British exporters sell great British products all around the world, and that's what trade deals can secure.
OK, well, we'll see what happens in that. Do you think, though, that the Trump administration is really listening to the UK? Because the Prime Minister came to the studio a few weeks ago and he talked about his plan for the coalition of the willing, for European and other allies to come together to be ready to defend a potential peace in Ukraine. I just want to play you and everyone at home what Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, said yesterday.
I think it's a combination of a posture and a pose and a combination of also being simplistic. I think there's this, this sort of notion of we've all got to be like Winston Churchill. Yeah. The Russians are going to march across Europe. I think that's preposterous.
Now, that's President Trump's envoy saying that the Prime Minister's idea for a coalition of the willing is a simplistic posture and a pose. What do you say to that? I mean, it's a pretty big snub, isn't it, to Keir Starmer's huge diplomatic efforts?
Well, I think we can see the impact of our Prime Minister's diplomatic efforts, bringing together European leaders and indeed leaders from other countries around the world, and also being in constant dialogue with President Trump as well as with Volodymyr Zelensky, who we welcomed to London just a couple of weeks ago. We want to see a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. I think that's what Donald Trump and the US administration want to see as well. I'm not put off by that. We will need to make sure that if there is a ceasefire, it can be enforced. And that's what our Prime Minister, along with allies around the world, is trying to secure. And of course, the US has got to be an important part of that. But it is right that European countries, including the UK, is upping defence expenditure, because in this uncertain world, national security, our domestic security is incredibly important for so many things, including a strong economy.
And just lastly, as you're here, many viewers will remember, and many viewers were very, very cross when you had just moved into office. It emerged that the Prime Minister and other Labour politicians and you had accepted donations of clothes. In the last few days, it's also emerged that you accepted free tickets for a corporate box to see the singer Sabrina Carpenter at London's O2 Arena this month. Is that what happened? And if you did, why are free clothes a no-no, but free concert tickets is a yes, please?
I went with a member of my family to see a concert a couple of weeks ago. I do now have security, which means it's not as easy as it would have been in the past to just sit in a concert, although that would probably be a lot easier for everyone concerned. So, look, I took those tickets to go with a member of my family. I thought that was the right thing to do from a security perspective.
Did you pay for them? Because you could pay for them.
Well, these weren't tickets that you could pay for. So there wasn't a price to those tickets. Obviously, I will declare that the value of them, but they weren't tickets that you were able to buy. OK,
Rachel Reeves, it's a big week for you, big, busy weekend. I know you've got lots of preparation still to do, so we appreciate you coming in this morning and talking to us at great length. Thank you very much indeed, Chancellor.